Mike Kern here with the Missouri Valley. We have our courtside chat, the last one of the year. One regular season game remains. We have 6 games on Sunday. One of them will determine our champion with Bradley hosting Drake. We have with us today Tom Ackerman and Kevin Lehman, and of course our host Harry Schroeder. And Tom, I'll let you start off by introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with the league and what you'll be doing at the tournament and what you do in real life. You're actually in the studio, so it's pretty obvious.
Well, I appreciate it. 20 years with the league. Hard to believe, but since 2003, I've been with the Missouri Valley Conference, starting as a sideline reporter for Arch Madness. What a lot of fun that was, and that developed into some play-by-play with the league. My first game was with Mac McCausland in Terre Haute. I'll never forget it. I came in early. I went to dinner with Mac McCausland at a steakhouse in Terre Haute, and then turned around and called a game at the Holman Center. My first game with Charlie Spoonhour was at the Holman Center in Terre Haute. I've made my way around all the arenas in the league and had a great time calling games through the years, including one of the great people on this call, Kevin Lehman. And I've been doing that for quite a while and had a blast with it. I will be this time, for the first time, actually the second time, hosting Arch Madness. So I did during the pandemic once, but otherwise I've served as sideline reporter for that great tournament at Enterprise Center. So I'll be hosting in the Scott Warman role as he moves into play-by-play for this event. Since 1997, I've been at KMOX, so we're looking at 25 years at the radio station in downtown St. Louis, the home of the St. Louis Cardinals, among other sports partners through the years. And since 2007, I have been sports director of the radio station. So I also anchor our morning show, Total Information AM, and host a show on Sunday called Sports on a Sunday Morning. So it's a lot of fun, news and sports, and that's my focus, along with college basketball.
Well, thank you, Tom. Of course, you mentioned Mac and Spoon, both of them leaving us way too soon. And let's introduce Kevin Lehman. And Kevin, your relationship with the league goes way back. So talk a little bit about your relationship with the conference and what you're doing. For sure, one of our TV voices, but give us a little rundown of Kevin Lehman.
Well, Mike, I was fortunate. I was an assistant at the University of Northern Iowa when they received the bid to join the Valley. I think it was 1991. So Missouri State had just come in a year before with the Spoon. And so I spent a number of years as an assistant in the Valley when they first joined. And remember the 94 team? We played in the old Checkerdome the last game against Southern Illinois in the championship game and lost that one to Paul Lusk and Lowry and Coach Heron's team. Went on to become the head coach at Nebraska Omaha. When I got out of coaching, I started a career in broadcasting, and this will be I had to look it up. This is my 12th year doing Valley games. I believe the 8th or 9th for the Arch Madness. So I'll be paired up with Scott Warman. And Tom made me remember my first game. I was with Scott Warman, Creighton at Drake. It went 3 overtimes. I was going to ask for some extra pay on that one because that was a long, long game. And Doug McDermott was playing. But I've had a great time, broadcasting with guys like Harry and Tom and Scott and Mitch Holthus. And it's just been a really fun experience. And they say in broadcasting, keep your day job. So I have a number of rental properties around the University of Iowa campus. So I've got to get home and fix some furnaces and some leaky roofs today.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Of course, Kevin was on the game at SIU last night and headed back to the state of Iowa. Tom, Kevin, you both do a wonderful job. You're great ambassadors for our league. And I'll introduce our third great ambassador on today's call. It's Harry Schroeder. Harry, you're our host. Guide us through the show.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Good morning, everybody. Aki, I wanted to start with you, a St. Louis guy, and then you go to the University of Indiana. And, of course, we know a lot of great broadcasters have come out of there. You and Todd Eichow. Talk about your time at Indiana.
What a great place. Joe Buck, Dick Enberg.
Oh, that guy too. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We've had some pretty good ones over there. Todd, of course, has done a wonderful job in our league. I loved my time at Indiana University. I grew up here in St. Louis, went to Indiana and studied media. I became one of the student broadcasters for, among other things, IU basketball. So I spent a lot of time around Bob Knight and that program. And in 4 years, got myself a basketball education. You know, I grew up playing youth basketball here in St. Louis. I played on a team in 5th and 6th grade that our starting guard was Anthony Parker, who played at Bradley and then in the NBA. And his mom was his dad, Larry, was our coach. Larry played at Iowa. His mom, Sarah, was our assistant coach, and she was pregnant. And she had their little baby daughter who used to hang out about a year or two old at our practices, Candace. So, you know, to think back to all that, to think back to all that time, played high school basketball here in St. Louis. And then I went to Indiana and I was introduced to a whole different world. I remember going into the rec center there and playing intramurals and thinking, whoa, I mean, this is a different story over here. I mean, they don't miss a shot. They're the basketball, they eat, sleep, and breathe it. And so I learned a lot more about basketball in my 4 years at IU. It really set me up for, I think, success calling games. I see a game differently than I did when I was younger and involved in it. And over time, it has really been, you know, broadcasting started there and continued here at KMOX. It's been a great journey.
And then Kevin, you are an Iowa guy, and you mentioned the Northern Iowa connection, the head coach at Nebraska Omaha, and you've got a lot of guys, Kevin, that we would know, named Valley names and people like that maybe coached with you, played with you, those kinds of things. List off some of those folks that we would know, Kevin, that you've had an influence on.
Well, they may have a bigger influence on me, Harry. When we first took the job at Northern Iowa, the joke is we had 4 players show up at the team meeting. 2 of those 4 one was named Nick Nurse, who went on to win the NBA championship in Toronto, lived across the street from me, would babysit my kids on the spur of a moment. And the other was Greg McDermott, who actually helped me get into broadcasting. And I always tell Greg I had my first win as a head coach against him when I was at UNO and he was at Wayne State. But when he took the Iowa State job, he wanted me to come and do the television. So I worked for the Cyclone Network. That's how I got started in the broadcasting. That kind of morphed into some Big 12 work. Valley work. Jack Watkins gave me a chance. So those are 2 guys that are really instrumental. And of course, that 1990 team, that I would say that's the team that got an invitation to the Valley. And Austin Fife's father, Steve, was on that team. Had some really good players, you know, Cam Johnson, Jason Daisy, Darren DeVries. I recruited Darren DeVries. It was 2 years with him before I left for Nebraska Omaha, now the head coach at Drake. So I really got a Valley influence throughout my lifetime. But I kind of, to Tom's, you know, talking about how it got him started, I grew up with 8 brothers. So I learned how to play in the barnyard. We were a farm kids and we would go at it. And I'm the smallest of them at 6'3". I got a couple brothers 6'6". So I became the guard. They were the post guys.
Yeah.
It's amazing how
I was very much undersized. I'm 6'2", about 215 right now. I wish I was this size in high school. I was 5'7", 130 pounds as a junior on the varsity team. So my job was to shoot threes and come in and guard when they needed to give the guards a breather. I had no size and no speed, but I could shoot it a little bit. So that was my spot on the team. You know, great memories for sure. And now I coach 6th grade girls basketball. So
come on.
I love being around. I can't get away from the game. I love it.
It's interesting that, Tom, you mentioned Anthony Parker because you know, I'm from Iowa City. Of course, Kevin Boyle played at Iowa. So we recruited Anthony Parker at Northern Iowa because we had the connection with his dad, Larry Parker, being a former Hawkeye. But we didn't get him. Ended up going to Bradley, and as you said, had a little bit of an NBA career. So, and I also got to mention Brian Jones, you know, assistant now at Bradley, also was on my staff at Nebraska Omaha. Had played for me at when I coached at UNI. So another connection with the Valley, a former Valley player that's done well in the coaching ranks.
Yeah, Anthony, he and I started in the backcourt in 5th grade, and then his backcourt mate with the Cavaliers was a little bit better than me, LeBron James.
So a little bit better. Hey, Kevin, I wanted to ask you about that 1990 team. Eldon Miller's the coach, and of course now his grandson is playing at Northern Iowa, or redshirting at Northern Iowa. And then that team knocks off the University of Missouri and another Northern Iowa guy, Norm Stewart. Just talk a little bit about that.
Well, that team was really special. And we'd won 19 the year before. The only senior was Nick Nurse. So he was our student assistant that year in 1990. We had everybody else back. Jason Reese, the all-time leading scorer, and Dale Turner, who's from St. Louis area, played for the Eagles program, was our point guard, still the all-time assist leader at Northern Iowa. Those are some numbers will never be broken. But not only did we beat Missouri in that in-state tournament game, we had beaten Iowa in the Unidome that year on January 2nd. First time Northern Iowa had beaten the University of Iowa since 1916. And that was when we put the court in the middle of the Unidome, had 25,000 people. It's still the largest indoor event, sporting event ever in the state of Iowa. So that was a really special team. We had played Georgetown right before that. They had two guys you might remember, Alonzo Mourning and Matumbo. We played them out in Vegas about 5 days before we played Iowa in the Unidome. But that was, here's a special memory of that game, Harry, was, we beat Missouri. Maurice Doobie hit a shot, a three-pointer to win that game at the end. And Norm Stewart came in our locker room. He had a tough year that year because they'd been ranked #1. I think that was the year he's diagnosed with cancer. Mm-hmm. He came in our locker room after the game and congratulated our players. Really a classy move by Norm Stewart. And I told this story when he comes back to the Northern Iowa golf outing. His wife came up to me and really thanked me for that because it was such a hard year for Norm. And he walked in our locker room and said, congratulated our guys and said, I used to coach at your school, and now you've got a really good coach. And it was really kind of a special moment for all of us and for Norm. And that's the Valley just shows you it's a real tight-knit family. Even guys like Norm, who coached there in the 60s, just still feels a part of the Valley.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, Kevin. Man, Norm Stewart means a lot to our family. My dad and Coach Stewart were great friends. My dad passed away way too young, but Norm was always very, very caring and still is to me and to my family. And that memory that you just painted, it was very painful for me. I'm actually glad that I didn't see it live. So I was actually in history class in high school and listening to it on the radio like this in the back of the room. And it still pains me to think about that loss. That was actually my first taste of, do not overlook an opponent. And Missouri actually, as you mentioned, didn't play all that well going into the tournament. They had been ranked #1 in the country, and they got stung by Northern Iowa. And that was my first, real heartbreak of a team rose up and beat my team.
Well, Tom, I think at that time, I think we were like the 3rd or 4th 14th seed to ever win. Now it happens every year, but it was such a big deal back then because it just did not happen very often. So we were the darlings for a couple of weeks and for a couple of days. We lost to Minnesota 2 days later by 3, or else we would have been a Sweet 16 team, and we would have had that whole week of being like the St. Peter's of the 1990 tournament.
Tom, I wanted to ask you about KMOX. It's such a great, gigantic station here in St. Louis, but all throughout the Midwest, and one of those historic radio stations in our country. And talk a little bit about maybe the sense of, honor, responsibility, et cetera, for carrying on the legacy of the Mighty Mocs.
Yeah, we really are stewards of the KMOX tradition. We really are our job is to pass it on to the next generation, as the group before us did. With Ron Jacober was the sports director before me, and before him was Jack Buck. We've had 3 sports directors in the history of the station. Wow. And in between that, we have had some incredible talent, from Bob Costas to Harry Carey to Jack Buck to Joe Buck to Dan Deerdorf to, you name them, they've come through. Joe Garagiola, Gary Bender, one after the other, Mike Shannon, John Rooney. It really is special to think about what we've had here at the station, and that's just sports. We're a news talk station with a lot of history. We're coming up on our 100th anniversary. We started Christmas Eve 1925, so we're very excited to be still a big part of what St. Louis does. We feel a responsibility to our listeners, and I, as somebody who's been here, you can feel when you're in the building the history of it. The expectations are perfection. You're never going to have that. We're all human beings, but we want KMOX to be the station still that everybody leans on in times of need, but also for a little entertainment and information. We have a good time over here. I know sports a big part of what we are, that's for sure, but we like being everybody's radio station. And that's always been appealing. You know, I grew up here. I listened to KMOX and always wondered what it was like. And then I went after it. When I graduated from college, I tried to put my foot in the door just to get a $7 an hour job over here, working behind the scenes, and got it, and never looked back.
You know, you probably can't see it over my right shoulder is a little gray little radio that used to sit in my dad's workspace in his basement. And we would sit there for hours and listen to Bob Burns and Bob Bragg on Monday nights and Tuesday nights when they would do sports on an open line. And that was my beginning of love for radio, is that little box that's over my right shoulder, listening to KMOX. And
That's
so
great.
you and I have similar, you know, growth, meaning both of us from here in St. Louis. I wanted to ask both of you, as we kind of think a little bit about the Missouri Valley Conference. I first want to ask you, Tom, give me your top 2 or 3 places you like to do games at in the Valley. I mean, obviously you mentioned Terre Haute as being some of your early history, but are there 1 or 2, maybe 3 places in the Valley you think, man, that's the place I love to do games?
Yeah, it varies. You know, I was just talking to somebody about this. I really love going over to Evansville. I think it's a great building. It's close to home. There are a lot of Cardinals fans there. I feel very much at home over there. You know, I went to school in the state of Indiana, so I have fun over there as well. I love the building. I think Ford Center is just a fantastic building. They take great care of it. They put a lot of care into what they do over there, and I've always kind of wanted UE to be good.
Mhm.
And you know, but I always enjoy my time over there. But boy, it's tough to pick just a couple. I mean, just kind of running through my head as to, you know, I'll start with the new one that I've kind of latched onto here. I've been to Murray now a couple of times, and I really like Murray State. I love the vibe down there. I think, you know, it's a great fan base, great group of people. You know, the crowds are great. They're going to come flooding into Arch Madness. That's the basketball atmosphere that I like. I like that kind of crowd. I like knowledge. The couple times that I've done games up at Valpo, I felt that. I felt that kind of, you know, anticipation of the action and fans who have been around for a long time. You know, I've had a real closeness to Bradley. My uncle went to Bradley, and I've always sort of wondered in my head, what's this place like when it's full or close to full? And I love the roar of the crowd at Bradley. I love the intimacy of Drake. That's always fun. But I guess if I were to pick one overall that kind of tugs at me, it is SIU, because my mom went to SIU, my aunt went to SIU. It's in the family, and you know, I had kind of, when I broke into the broadcasting for the league, I mentioned 2003, but I was actually covering the Valley very closely before that. When I first started at KMOX, I was hanging around Jack Watkins and Mike Kern and anybody else who would listen, that I just loved basketball, and they kind of, you know, gave me great access, and I became pretty close with Bruce Weber right out of the gate. And so, you know, my best access early on was with the Salukis. So I've always, you know, if I were to pick one, if I had to, it'd probably be that one.
Kevin, I asked him for 2 or 3. He gave me about 7. How about you? Give me one or 2 of your top places. He should be in politics, right?
Yeah, I should be political. And you're going to get us in trouble, Harry, because it's so hard to pick. But on Tom, what just Tom said, Murray State is a great environment, and they treat you like royalty when you walk in there. And they got those banners hanging. They got John Morant's poster hanging. It's really a fantastic atmosphere in that arena. But as far as cities, you know, I've been gone to Belmont a number of times. I like the way they play. They're a fun team to broadcast because they're going to shoot threes. They're going to play fast. But I think my master's degree is from Drake when I was coaching high school in Des Moines, and they've done such a great job with that arena. As far as the lower bowl's been, they spent, I believe, $6 million in closing the lower bowl. They're going to do the upper bowl. They've really marketed themselves as Des Moines' hometown team. Of course, I coached Darren DeVries at UNI, recruited him, so I have a little extra closeness there with him as being a former player. But my heart's got to go back to UNI and the McLeod Center. Although I never got to coach a game in there, I've called a number of games in there, and people still talk about that championship final game last year, Loyola at Northern Iowa. I don't know if it went 2 overtimes, 3 overtimes, because it's a blur to me, but I still have people text me that it's the best game they've ever attended or watched on TV that Clay Matvick and I called with Lucas Williamson and AJ Green going just exchanging blow to blows. And I think that's one of the funnest atmospheres I've ever done a game in. But I'm kind of like Tom, Southern's a great place. You can just go right down the arena. Indiana State still gives me bad vibes because every time I went there with a Northern Iowa team, something strange happened in the game. The ghost of Larry Bird would come and take a win away from us every time at the Holman Center.
You mentioned Clay, you two on TV, you're just television magic. You guys are spectacular together.
Well, it's been a fun connection because, I didn't know this, Harry, but he was a local sportscaster in Omaha when I was at the University of Nebraska Omaha as the head coach. And he said, "Do you remember the time I interviewed?" And I said, "I have no idea." But it kind of came back to light to me that he had covered some of my games at Omaha, but we just kind of really hit it off. And he's become a really good friend. And of course, I'm going through this season doing some cancer treatments, and he's been a huge help and boost in helping me through that, because there are times when you get chemo fog during a broadcast. It hasn't jumped up and bit me too much, but Clay's always in there, and guys like Tom to bail me out in case your mind, there's a second it might go blank, because that chemo fog is a real thing. So Tom and Scotty and all those guys, and especially Clay, have really been a huge asset and really give me a confidence level calling games this season.
I want to come back and talk about that in just a minute. Kevin, we've been, aware and walking with you in this whole thing. But Tom, I wanted to ask you about the garage happy hour. Can you take us back to COVID and the invention of the happy hour?
Yeah. So in March of 20, when the pandemic hit, I was down in spring training. We ended up staying an extra week down there to cover the team and kind of what they were doing to all depart and covering that as a news story. But at the same time, we were scrambling to try to figure out what we were going to do. We ended up playing all of the 2011 Cardinals season from when they were 10.5 out until Game 7 of the World Series. I figured that would buy us like 7 weeks. So we arranged to pull all of those off of a hard drive, and we played every game, win or lose, as if the season was happening. And that gave us a little time to sell some advertising and actually play some baseball while listeners were looking for something. And in the meantime, when I came back to St. Louis in middle of March, I would sit on the back deck at the end of the day because our heads were spinning, and I would open up a beer and say, "Hey, what are people doing on Twitter?" And I called it Twitter Happy Hour, and people were responding with pictures of, what they were drinking. And then about a week later, our sales manager reached out and said, "Hey, I love this Twitter Happy Hour. What if we took one of your clients, Overhead Door is interested in sponsoring. We did it out of your garage, and we called it the Garage Happy Hours." His idea was the name. And I said, "That's a great idea. So yeah, I'll do that." So I did it out of my garage, and I'd have a beer and I'd, sit there and interact with people and answer their sports questions. And after a couple of episodes, my boss, Steve Moore, said, "I love the Garage Happy Hour, but I got a suggestion. What if you had a guest come on? You're great, but what if you had a guest come on and you guys just interact?" So I called Kenny Wallace, NASCAR driver here in St. Louis, and I did the first Garage Happy Hour with Kenny, and it was a big hit. And I got a call from Kurt Hunzecker, who was the outgoing president of the St. Louis Battlehawks. He said, "Garage Happy Hour, what the heck was that? I love it. Can I come on?" He said, "I want to come on and tell the story of what happened to the Battlehawks because the XFL had folded." And so I said, "Let's go." So he came on, and that did well. So then I started trying to one up each one. So I asked Chris Pronger, I asked Ozzie Smith, I had Sterling K. Brown, the actor. I had, eventually Albert Pujols and anybody I could get my hands on to try to outdo one and the other, because the numbers were good and the sponsors were coming in. So basically it was a pandemic show that is, I could always bring it back. All I have to do is open up my laptop and crack open a beer and we're
go to the garage.
But it was fun. It was, it was a way to get some quick entertainment going during the pandemic. And quite honestly, it was easy to get guests because nobody was going anywhere. Everybody's at home. So I just get them. And, we started the whole, it was StreamYard as the platform, but we started the video shows that that a lot of people, continue to do today. We stopped it kind of when the pandemic was relieved a little bit, but boy, was it fun.
Hey, Kevin, in the current time right now, you have a couple of different radio shows you do daily, weekly, whatever it is. Tell us a little bit about where people can find you on the radio through the week.
Well, I do. It's mainly in Iowa because we're going to talk about the University of Iowa Hawkeyes, Iowa State Cyclones, the Drake Bulldogs, and Northern Iowa Panthers. So I do a weekly segment with a station out of the Cedar Rapids, KGYM, the gym class, Colbert out of the Cedar Falls, Waterloo area, and actually do one out of Sioux City, and then KXNO out of Des Moines on Thursday mornings. And sometimes it's kind of lather, rinse, repeat on some of those shows. But, it's a Hawkeye state, so I really try to pub the Valley and Drake and Northern Iowa and make sure that they have equal representation, because the interesting thing about Iowa is there are no pro sports teams, football or basketball. So people really follow their college teams, and they have great allegiance to the Bulldogs, to the Panthers, to the Hawkeyes, to the Cyclones. So, and then of course with Brandon Weesey, I'm on here in the St. Louis station talking about Valley games and the upcoming Arch Madness and so forth. So basketball has become pretty much a full-time job for me from November through March.
Oh man, I hear you. I had last weekend, I coached 2 games on Friday. Saturday, I had my team together that morning, and then I went to Springfield to do the Missouri State game. There's another place I like. Then came back Sunday, coached a couple of games, and then called the SLU women's game on radio that afternoon. And you know what? I was not even basketballed out. I was just fulfilled. I just love it.
Love that stuff. Kevin, you have a couple of shows today, but I think sandwiched in between there is your final chemo treatment. And I want to talk about that for a minute or so. I remember back, you and I did a game back the first part of December, and a couple of days before we got together, you said, "Hey, I don't want to surprise you, but when we get together, I'm not going to have any hair. I'm going through cancer treatment." I hadn't heard any of that. You've been slugging through that thing and just killing it. So proud of you and happy for you. We've been praying for you a long time, but talk about this journey you've been on. Final chemo treatment today, ringing the bell this afternoon. But tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was diagnosed and I'm going to have a tattoo to my forearm, August 12th, 2022, and started treatment in September. So this will be 8 months. I went through chemo treatments, which are really difficult to deal with. And now I'm actually in radiation. My 17th radiation is this afternoon. And when you're done, you get to ring the bell. So actually, we're going to try and video that and use it on the Bradley Drake game on Sunday, because I had a meeting with ESPN. We had a call yesterday morning where they asked me to do that, and doing a lot of work for Coaches vs. Cancer, Jimmy V Foundation, because I really think my journey, Harry, can help others. And what they told me is, you got to stay with your daily routines. The people that kind of that check out are the ones that they have the real battle. So stay with your routine. I kind of say Lance Armstrong. He went back and won that Tour de France. So I just kept plugging away. That Sunday game will be my 49th game this season.
Wow.
And there's a couple I don't remember in mid-December because I was just finished up. And chemo kind of cycles you. You're on steroids the first couple of days in that cocktail they give you, but by day 10, 11, 12, you cycle down and your immune system's beat up pretty bad. So I remember a couple of days in mid-December, Northern Iowa, like St. Bonaventure. I barely remember parts of that game. But I think that, the support I've gotten from guys like Tom and yourself and Jack Watkins and Jeff Jackson and Mike Kern and everyone else from the Valley has really been uplifting and spiritual for me. There's a big article just came out of Des Moines Register today where they kind of shadowed me for a week, and the gymnasium or the arenas was really my salvation, where you didn't think about cancer. And when the game started, it kind of kicked in, being a former athlete, coach, the drilling kicked in. So I just never had any issues once the game started with any effects of the chemo, the radiation. It was just kind of being in that gym was my salvation and got me through this. And, you mentioned my girlfriend, Madonna McCormick, really fought with my doctor, said, because I do that Paradise Jam every year. Brad Wells and I go down there we do 24 games in 9 days. And I remember she told my Dr. Farouk, he said, this is very emotionally, Kevin has to do this tournament. He's got to get the Virgin Islands. So they worked my chemo around that so I could go down and do those games. My hair fell out right before we went down. I had a wig I was going to wear, but it was 90 degrees. I said to Brad Wells, I'm throwing this thing away, man. I'm going on here. I'm going on this thing bald. So that's kind of how that developed. But yeah, it's a big day for me today, Harry, because at 4:30, I'm ringing the bell, and Tom was talking about beers in his garage. At 4:45, I'm having a beer.
That a baby. There you go.
Well, we can't be more happy, Kevin, than for the progress. And I know for a while they've been giving you good reports, and people all over the valley have been pulling for you.
Well, yeah, I really, Harry, I go back to, I really hope that I can continue with this and help other people that are diagnosed through their journey, and, somehow be a motivation, or a, beam of light for those. Cause it's, when you hear those words, you have cancer, you just don't know what the future is going to hold for you. So, hopefully I can reach out, and I want to get involved more with the Jimmy V Foundation, Coach vs. Cancer, and try to be an inspiration to some other people.
Well, you've been inspiring this year. Really appreciate it. Before we finish up, I want to ask both of you. I'll start with you, Tom. Arch Madness is coming up, and it looks like it's going to be one of the most competitive 4 days of basketball we've ever seen in St. Louis. Give us a thought or two about Arch Madness coming up, but also about your affection and love affair for Arch Madness.
I love Arch Madness. I've watched it grow, and I've watched how much care is put into it. And like I said, as a reporter for KMOX, one of my first things I did was get credentialed for Arch Madness. So going back to the late 90s, and I would hang out and report on the tournament and interview coaches and players. And it was just such a great experience to have a tournament in my town. And to watch it grow has been a lot of fun. And the colors of all the different teams and fans and the urgency of it is what it's all about. That the winner gets the automatic bid to the tournament. There have been some Arch Madness tournaments where there were 3, 4, 5 teams that were going to go to the NCAA tournament. But regardless, the automatic bid going to the tournament is such a big deal. And this year you're talking about 12 teams with a shot at it. Now, the teams that'll play on Thursday in this new format, because you have 12 teams now, are going to have a long road. That's hard. I mean, I don't care how good you are. You try to win Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you come out of that, you're in great shape. So the teams that play on Friday, I think, have a huge advantage. The ones who start early. And, so that's going to be interesting, because we still have a battle for who the top 4 are. But I think it is going to be a lot of fun. I mentioned Murray State. I think they will bring some people, but I'll be very curious to see who's the number 2 size crowd, because my anticipation is Murray's going to have a hefty contingent there. Who brings the fans, and then is that a factor when it comes to momentum? And I love, sitting as close as I can to where I won't be this year. I'm going to be upstairs, but I love being around the coaches and watching them direct their teams. I really enjoy that, because I know that some of those coaches are going to become superstars in the business. That's just the way the Valley is. It's such good talent in coaching, and I'm excited to see who comes out of it. It's hard for me to make a pick. I won't do that, but I will tell you that Drake is going to be very difficult to beat. And when I saw Bradley play in their house a couple of times now, but in particular, there was a game earlier this year, they blew out UIC. Like, I totally get that. And I was at the game and I called the game, but I remember sitting there watching it and saying to myself, I don't care who is playing them today in this house, the way they're playing defense, maybe Alabama or something, nobody's beating them today. I don't care who it is. So they lock down defensively when they want to. They are deadly. So, those are my top 2, but I think there are some really, really good teams right now in this league. The Southern Illinois, Belmont looks like a tournament team at times. They look like a team that could make a run in March when they're hot, and they got one of the best players in the league. And then you're talking about Indiana State, which can blow you out on any given night. So it's going to be fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun, Kevin. Indiana State's already sold out all of their tickets, their allotment, so they're going to bring a lot of people. Kevin, your thoughts about Arch Madness in general and what you're looking for this weekend, next weekend?
Harry, my favorite moment is that national anthem.
Mm.
I mean, it just grasps that guy that sings that thing it's amazing to start that off. And, and I have memories of coaching in it. And I mentioned before, we played that last game in the old Checker Dome, championship game against Southern Illinois with Cam Johnson, was the first player off the non-winning team to be named MVP. And Southern Illinois crowd booed him for that. I still joke with Cam about that, but he went off. I mean, he was knocking in threes like it was going out of style. But to Tom's point, I think there's 5 teams in the Valley that could all go in the NCAA tournament and win games.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's going to make this such a great tournament. And I agree with him. You got Drake playing at a high level, and they've got seniors, they've got older guys, and we kind of know what happens at Arch Madness in the Valley is guard play and older experienced players win those games. Bradley's been dynamite. Bradley is now healthy.
Mm-hmm.
With Montgomery back, Mass missed some games, and Jashawn Henry, the best 6 man in the league. They're going to be very formal, and Indiana State can ring up threes. Southern can lock you down with defense. Belmont plays that fast pace. They could be down 12, and the next thing you know, they're up 3. So I think this is going to be, the most competitive tournament we've seen in a long time. And unfortunately, probably only one team's going to get a bid. But I go back to my original statement. I think there's 5 Valley teams that could enter the NCAA tournament and win games this year.
I think you're right. Outstanding talent, and the teams are maybe playing their best right now. You think about Drake with, I guess it's 10 in a row or 11 in a row, and Bradley is 9 or 10 in a row. And some outstanding hoops being played right now by the teams from the Missouri Valley Conference. Mike, a lot of the schools, I mentioned Indiana State has sold out all of their tickets, and we know Murray's going to bring a ton of people. How do people get tickets? And tell us, Mike, a little bit about some of the stuff that's going to be taking place around Arch Madness.
Yeah, you bet. Certainly tickets, archmadness.com, Ticketmaster, go to the Enterprise Center box office. And Tom, I know the question wasn't phrased this way from Harry, but Enterprise Center's got to be one of your favorites to call a game from too, or at least host the tournament from. So
yeah, very special. I mean, it's literally right there. I'm right next to it. So yeah, I just love the place so much, and our longtime relationship with the St. Louis Blues and all the times we've had in that building. Enterprise Center is awesome and a huge part of our city's success from a sports standpoint. We've had a lot of fun there, so it's going to be incredible.
And Kevin, you mentioned Maurice Newby hitting the shot against Mizzou. Northern Iowa's had a history of guys hitting memorable shots. Ali Farokmanesh, Paul Jesperson, and of course at the tournament, Wes Washburn hitting the game winner against Evansville and the Panthers to the NCAA tournament. So we're going to have games like that. We're going to have games like that where somebody's going to hit a game winner. So I encourage all these fans watching, buy your tickets, man. Get your tickets and get to the tournament. In the winner-take-all game on Saturday, Bradley and Drake playing in a winner-take-all game. We've had 7 previous in our history where the 2 teams facing one another with tied records, and the winner goes to the regular season title. Bradley's been in one of them. They beat Tulsa in '82. Drake has never been in one. So it's going to be a raucous event over at Carver Arena. I know you do a great job calling the game, Kevin.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to it. And Clay and his text started flying last night when we saw that Bradley won and Drake won, because we were kind of hoping those teams were going to go in there and be a winner take all at Carver Arena coming this Sunday. So we'll be ready to go.
And Tom, you mentioned how hard it's going to be for coming off of Thursday. Never had a team win 4 games in 4 days at Arch Madness, win the title. Valpo got close when they went to the title game after playing on Thursday in 2019. But this might be the year. This might be the year. We've got teams that will start on Thursday that are very capable. So
yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's going to take a heck of an effort. And sometimes, you can get a magical moment out of a player that can just carry you through, but it really will take an amazing amount of endurance. But there's enough talent on that floor. And by the way, there's some dark horses too in this tournament that could end up stunning everybody. So you just never know. It's just because there's such great coaching. One of the best coaches this league has ever seen is Ben Jacobson. And I know they lost yesterday, but I just would not doubt him when it comes to knowing how to navigate through this. So you got to be careful when you face somebody like that.
Well,
Hey, well, to your
Yeah,
to
go
your
ahead, Kevin.
point, Tom, when I attend those shoot arounds, and just even yesterday talking to Brian Mullins and Ben Jason in their game day shoot arounds, the adjustments they make during the course of a game, and they're not the only two coaches to do it. Our league is full of coaches that have great basketball minds, and I'm just amazed at how attuned they are at making adjustments. The chess match between coaches in a game is just an astounding thing to watch, and we have some of the brightest minds in basketball coaching these Valley teams. And to your point, Tom, there'll be some upsets. There always are, and it may open the window for some other teams to have a better path. But the coaching in this league is tremendous. You can go right down the list: Casey Alexander, Darren DeVries, Brian Ward, on, and it's that's what's going to make this a great tournament, because these coaches are so good at adjusting during the course of a game and trying to find the other team's weaknesses. And then you have the counter move by the other coach. So and this is where it comes to its height here at Arch Madness next week.
Well, that's why these Power Five, these big teams don't want to play Valley teams, because, they know what they are. They're prepared, they're tough, they're relentless. And Mike has these stats better than me, but more often than not, they're very successful in the NCAA tournament, whoever comes out of this. So basically, if you're going to Arch Madness, you're getting a preview of the next team that will likely make a run through the NCAA tournament. And in some cases, we've seen a Final Four team. We've seen this often. So it's not like they just win a game or two. I mean, they go all the way. So yeah, it's going to be a blast.
Yeah, I'll wrap it up with your stats, Tom. So since 2012, we're 12-3 in first round games. We've had 2 Final Four teams, and the winner of Arch Madness will be in the NCAA tournament, and we expect them to win a few games. And Harry, you want to wrap us up here? This is all I have.
Well, listen, Kevin, ring that bell this afternoon. We're so excited for you, my friend. We look forward to seeing you here in St. Louis in a couple of weeks, or a week from today, actually. And Tom, so appreciate all that you guys do at KMOX for the Valley. I mean, I know you guys are pimping the product over there at the Mighty Mocs, and obviously you do a great job hosting all of that. Mike, it's just been great this season, having these opportunities to talk to these guys throughout the league, and getting to know a little bit behind the scenes, more than just, well, they announced the game or a number behind a name, but really getting to know these broadcasters and journalists.
Guys, thank you very much. We'll see all of you beginning Wednesday into Thursday. First games on Thursday, starting at noon next week. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Harry.
A lot of fun, guys. Thank you.